this shirt is older than most of you, and I don't know how I feel about that. My name is Dom Douglas, and I am back-to-back XWW Commentator of the Year. With that comes some responsibilities, but also a lot of fun and excitement, and I'm never ashamed to look like a complete fool. Speaking of that, I love playing Magic the Gathering, so much so that I kind of think I play it a little bit too much, and I have some opinions. So now, XtremeTVOnline.com and XWW Wrestling on YouTube presents my podcast where I talk about Magic the Gathering. It's the Goblin Grenade Podcast. That's right, you can't teach them to throw the cursed things. My name is Dom Douglas, back-to-back Commentator of the Year for XWW, and this is episode 4 of the Goblin Grenade Podcast. Filmed in January, before I went to New Jersey for a few weeks. It's called a stockpile. Anyway, we're doing some more Karlov Manor spoilers. Even though by the time you see this, the set's going to be out. But last week was topical because of Season 3 Diablo 4. Along with the, Karlov Manor bundles. This week, though, the next 2 weeks, I will guarantee that they will be, for the most part, my first 2 parts of my 4-part, apparently, extravaganza commander deck collection. That's what happens when you own 20 plus commander decks and you decide to film a bunch of them. It takes you a long time to do so. They're going to be a little different, too. They're actually edited. I did them a while ago. Once again, backlog. And I'm going to have to use it all. But we're going to start with the black cards, some of them. I'm not doing a lot. And who knows, the topic of conversation, this may go a little quicker than I might anticipate. And if that's the case, okay, cool. Yes, last week's was a half hour. So, no, like 35 something minutes. So, we're going to get started with Snarling Gorehound. It's a 1-drop, and I love me some 1-drops for a 1/1 creature dog with menace. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, surveil 1. I already know this card's going to be an all-star in Pauper. And if you don't know what that format is, that is a Magic the Gathering format where you use nothing but commons. It's a Pauper all-star, and it will be. This will be a budget darling for me as well. I can see this slotting into a whole bunch of budget decks if it's not too pricey. This could actually be one of those common cards that absolutely is $1.50 in this set. I've seen it before, and there are a couple commons that are that price, and it's very silly. Overall, good card. Then we have Outrageous Robbery, X Black for an instant rare. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though were any mana of any type to cast it. This is going to be good. This is a really good card. First off, say it's X5, and you exile the top X cards of your opponent's library face down. Face down is key. You don't know what they are. Your opponent doesn't know what they are, but you can, because you can look and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So they get sent off into a special exile part. So the exile. So you know which cards Outrageous Robbery grabbed. And you can basically play your opponent's deck whenever you feel like it. This is a very powerful card in the rare slot for Karlov Manor. And then the last black card that we're going to look at, it doesn't add up. 3 black. For an instant uncommon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Suspected. When a card gets suspected, it's going to have menace and it can't block. But I love the 5-drop return target creature card from graveyard to the battlefield cards in black, because my Rutstein deck, old Rutstein, fills the graveyard up, and I constantly bring him back with cards like this. So I can see cards like that, cards it doesn't add up, being an all-star in that deck. Now we're going to go into the blue cards. Do they do? They do. There we go. We have Forensic Gadgeteer for 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Vidalcan Artificer Detective. Detectives are going to be a big part in creatures in this set. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. Create a clue token. It's an artifact with 2. Sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. Activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana, and that costs to less than 1. So you bring this out on turn 3. You get a clue. And instead of it costing 2 to sack and tap, instead of just costing 2 to sacrifice the artifact, it costs 1 to sacrifice your clues now. And any ability for artifacts, this is going to slot very well into artifact heavy decks. So yeah, artifact blue decks are getting some good things. I can also see this slotting in if I eventually ever upgrade my Urza pre-con deck. But I don't think I might. I think I want to keep that as OG as possible. Next up, we have Mistway Spy for 1 blue mana for a 1/1 uncommon creature merfolk detective. It's got flying. Other thing is it's got disguise for 1 and a blue. You may cast this card face down for 3, and it's a 2/2 creature. You may, with ward 2, you may turn it face up at any time for its disguise cost. And when Mistway Spy is turned face up until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, investigate. Make a clue token. I see this slotting in with the merfolk decks. I also see me putting this in the budget merfolk decks that I play too. It's a good 1-drop. It's flying. It's got evasion. It's merfolk. It makes an artifact. We're not exploring with the map tokens, but we're making artifacts, and there's things to do. There's plenty of things to do in the green-blue color scheme of merfolk that deals in sacrificing artifacts or doing something with artifacts or messing with artifacts in general. So yeah, I can see this slotting in pretty good. Next, we have Agency Outfitter for 4 blue, a 6-drop for a Sphinx Detective that's a 4/3 flyer. When it enters a battlefield, you may search your library. You may search your graveyard, hand, or library for a card named Magnifying Glass and or a card named Thinking Cap and put them onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle. I highlighted this card because draft, I think one of the 2 cards is in the set, and I think it's Magnifying Glass as of right now, but these cards that do this ability to hunt for something occasionally can be more powerful than we all give it credit for. That being said, it might not be that card. It might not be that powerful in draft or limited or even in budget standard stuff. But keep an eye out on this card. I want to see how it performs in the first couple drafts I do in this set. Then finally, this is a stupid card. Lost in the Maze. X blue for an enchantment with flash. When Lost in the Maze enters the battlefield, tap X target creatures. Put a stun counter on each of those creatures you don't control. Tapped creatures you control have hexproof. So basically, you get to tap down your opponent's entire board of creatures. And they don't untap their next turn because they all got stun counters on them. And then whenever you attack, as long as it gets turned sideways and they don't interact with your creatures before they attack, they have hexproof. They can't mono red decks can't blast it out of the sky with insane shocks or the multitude of 3 damage to target creatures or even the board wipes. Not the board wipes because they hit everything. They're not targeted. But a lot of the targeted removal, Lost in a Maze, figures that out real quick. Now we're going to go into Colorless. There's only 2. It's the Case of the Shattered Pact for 2 mana for an enchantment case. When this case enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Mana fixing. To solve, there are 5 colors among permanents you control. If unsolved, solve at the beginning of your end step. Worded a little dumb, but it's constantly checking to see if it's solved. Once you solve it, it becomes solved. As long as you make it to your end step. Then it checks again. Hey, do you meet the requirements of the 5 colors among permanents you control? Then congratulations, you have solved the case. And then you get, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains flying, double strike, vigilance until end of turn. It's an uncommon. Domain is still a thing, especially with one of the artifacts. One of the enchantments in the duels that I'll show you in a little bit. I showed you it last week. It's the guild. It's the pack thing. It's the ley line thing. Speaking of that blue card, magnifying glass. 3 mana for a ramp. Tap to add basic colorless mana. 4 and tap to investigate to create a food token, a clue token. Spend 2 and sack it to draw a card. And now this is where we're going to spend a lot of the episode here, folks. The gold. Last week I already went over Lord Leader's Call. For 1 red and a white enchantment, creatures you control get +1/+1. Anthem effects are really good no matter the format in Standard. No matter what it's been, Anthem effects, an Anthem effect being, hey, my creatures get +something, or really good. And whenever a creature enters battlefield under your control, this deals Word Leader's Call deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if you play a lot of token builds, this is going to be a really good card. I'm hoping, I don't think it'll happen, but I'm hoping this is a budget card. I would love to put this in a $10 deck for Boros tokens. I would love that. I don't know if it's going to happen, though. I think it might be just a little bit out of budget. And if you don't know my budget for my budget builds now, they're $10. I try to make a complete standard deck, 60 card main board, 15 card sideboard, for a grand total of $10. They're a lot of fun to do, a lot of fun to come up with. How do I say it? The joy in those is trying to see if you want to get back into Magic, because as I alluded to last time, Professor, Tolarian Community College, he got me back into this game with a $5 deck tech that he did, and it was Heroic from the set. I forgot what, Theros or something like that. Yeah, the first time we were in Theros, and Heroic. And he did this $5 simple budget build to see if you wanted to get back into the game of Magic. 10 years later almost, I'm still hooked. I'm hooked now more than I was when I could afford it. I'm kidding. So anyway, next card, we have Granite Witness for 2 white and a blue for a Gargoyle Detective Artifact creature. Remember, artifacts. For a 3/2. As Disguise for hybrid white-blue, 2 of them. So hybrid Azorius mana. And when it's turn face up, you may tap or untap target creature. I like this. You could spread it out over 2 turns. The cost first would be 3 to turn it face down. And then surprise, before your combat, I'll turn it up and I can untap one of your creatures or untap my big one that I just attacked with that you went through. So you can do some combat tricks with this. I like it. Sanguine Savior. I know last week I said this was going in my Edgar Markov deck. It ain't. It is, however, going in it's going to go into a lot of budget builds that I do. A lot of budget builds. So 1 black and a white for a 2/1 flying lifelink creature vampire cleric with Disguise, 2 Orzhov colors, white or black. When it's turn face up, another target creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. I see me playing this in a lot of budget builds. Let's get my voice a little. Urgent Necropsy. I said this before. I'll say it again. I'm going to play this. I'm going to play this a lot in my Rutstein deck. And in my Lathril deck. And in decks that I play 4 or 5 color stuff in. As an additional cost to cast a spell, collect Evidence X, where X is the total mana value of the permanents this spell targets. So if you target in total 10 mana's worth of stuff on your opponent's board, you have to exile 10 mana's worth of creatures from your graveyard. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, and up to 1 target planeswalker. Just the fact that I can get rid of an artifact, a creature, and an enchantment. Planeswalkers aren't really that much played in Commander, but I can definitely target the first three. Fairy Snoop, once again, another card I went over last week for 1 black and a blue for a fairy detective creature, 1/4 flying with disguise, 1 Demir Demir. You can either pay hybrid mana, blue black. When it's turned face up, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put 1 into your hand, 1 into your graveyard. This is one that I was railing against, that like commons just do too many things now. It flies. It's a 1/4. It's a big butt. It's 3 mana or 3 mana with the disguise. 6 spread out over 2 turns, if you will. Turn it face up. You get to look at 2. You get to loot. It might go in some fairy decks as a 2 of. I don't think as a 4 of. But definitely going in as a 2 of. The Planeswalker of the set, if I'm not mistaken, Kaya Spirit's Justice. 2 black and a white. For legendary Planeswalker Kaya with 3 starting loyalty. With a static ability. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control and or creature cards in your graveyard are put into exile, you may choose a creature card from among them. Until end of this turn, target token you control becomes a copy of it, except it has flying. So if I have a 1/1 token, and I have a 10/10 that I get exiled through Kaya, I can make that a 10/10 flyer. For +2, survey a 2, and then exile a card from a graveyard. So you look at the top 2 cards of your library, you can put them in the graveyard, or put them back on top. +1, create a 1/1 black-white spirit creature token with flying. So it itself helps itself. It makes the tokens that you need to activate the static. The +2 activates the static. -2, exile target creature you control. For each other player, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. It's going to be a good card. This is going to be a really good card for a while. First couple of weeks, I said it might stomp a lot of decks because everyone's still preparing. Everyone still have their builds for Shiradid and stuff like that. You know, Wandering Emperor, and nobody's going to expect the Kaya's Spirit's Justice most of the time. And when it hits, they might just like go, what does this do? And then it's too late. Moving on up to Gadget Technician, 2 black, 2 blue, red for a 3/2 Goblin Artificer. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Disguise. 2, is it hybrid? Blue or red. For 5 mana spread across 2 turns, you get 4 power and 3 toughness with 2 spread across 2 creatures. I like this card, especially in budget brews. I like that term a lot. But once again, there's a lot of token things, and you know, Jeskai, or Leader's Call, the Anthem, and whenever a creature comes in, yeah, I look for token makers in the set like that for a card like that. Here's a big one. Relive the Past for 5 green and white. Return up to 1 target artifact card, up to 1 target land card, up to 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. They are 5/5 elemental creatures in addition to their other types. So for 7 mana, you get an artifact card, a land card, and a non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. They also become 5/5 creatures, so you put 15 power on the board. Damn. Many have tried to subjugate Ravnica. All have failed. All will fail. So yeah, this card is a bomb in Draft. I don't know about Constructed. I know in Commander it'll see some play. Sludge Titan. This card it's a clue card from the clue set. Because I love Rutstein. And that does graveyard stuff. It's one of my favorite graveyard shenanigans ever. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 5 cards. You may put a creature or a land card from among them into your hand. My Rutstein deck loves to feed the graveyard. Sludge Titan will only help that, but it's a clue card, so it's probably going to be way more pricey than I want to admit or even care about. Now, once again, here's that Boros Dog Walker for a red and a white for a 3/1 human citizen with vigilance and disguise for 2 Boros hybrid. When Dog Walker is turned face up, create 2 tapped 1/1 dog creature tokens. This is the type of card that would be a 4 that's going to be a 4 of in budget brews for that token deck that I want to make. The mana is perfect. The 3 creatures that it makes when you disguise it, the 2 creatures that it makes when you disguise it are perfect. It's just they're perfect doges. Look at the doges. Doppelgang, triple X, not the movies, blue, green, Simic. For each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. If X is 1, 1, 1, 1, for 1 target permanent, create 1 token. 2, 2, 2. For each 2 target permanents, create 2 tokens that are copies. 3, 3, 3. So now we're at 9, 11. Never probably going to happen most of the time. For each of 3 target permanents, create 3 tokens that are copies of that permanent. In the right hands, in the right build, this card can get dumb. Just dumb. I'm looking at my old Simic token deck, Commander Precon. That's been broken up for a while, but I think it might want to be rebuilt, if you know what I mean. Enzrag the Quake Mole. I already know this card. I've already experienced the pleasure that people have found in discovering this card for 2 red and a green for an 8/4 Mole God. Whenever Enzrag the Quake Mole becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this combat, there's an additional combat phase. For 3, 2 red, and a 2 green, Enzrag must be blocked each combat this turn if able. You're going to lose games to this card. We're all going to lose games to this card. If you play this card, we're all going to win games with this card too. It's going to be great. In draft, not so much, because it's a mythic. And statistically speaking, you shouldn't encounter this card a lot. And if you do, pick it. Just pick it. There's no thought. Pick it. Because in a limited environment, this card is going to put work in. Treacherous Greed for an instant. 1 blue, 1 white, and a black. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sack a creature that dealt damage this turn. Draw 3 cards. Each opponent loses 3. You gain 3 life. So you need a creature that dealt damage. So basically, very conditional. It can be done in a bunch of ways, though. It doesn't have to be combat damage. Draw 3 cards. Then each opponent loses 3 life. You gain 3 life. You're up 3 cards and do a 6-point life swing for 3 mana. As long as you meet that condition. And I'm thinking the Orzhov decks are going to meet that condition very easily. Gleaming Geardrake for blue and a red. It's one of my favorite, prototypical Izzet cards. Blue-red for a 1/1 flyer with upside. When Gleaming Geardrake enters the battlefield, investigate, so make a clue. Whenever you sack an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Gleaming Geardrake. That's a clue. That's a food. That's a treasure. That's any artifact you can sacrifice. All right? You put a +1/+1 counter on this thing. I love that prototypical Izzet 2-drop 1/1 flyer with upsides. That gets bigger. I love them. I'm probably going to play this a bunch. I will probably draft a ton of these on paper and in arena. Drag the Canal for a blue and a black for an instant. Create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. If a creature died this turn, you gain 2, survey 2, then investigate. You can get, it doesn't matter which creature too. It could be one of yours, it could be one of your opponents. This card has so much upside. Thank goodness, it's a rare. Imagine if this was uncommon. I mean, in Constructed, this is going to be a big issue to deal with this card. Gaining 2, filtering through your library, investigating future filtering. This is a good card. It's definitely not going to be in a budget, I'll tell you that right now. It might be worth more than an entire budget deck that I do, which if you don't know is $10, and those will start going up on my YouTube channel soon, the Zero Trade-in Value Productions YouTube channel. I'll start doing those back up. I put this card in because them cheeky bastards over at Wizard made a cease and desist card. No, it doesn't have the added upside of having the Pinkertons play the rest of your game for you. The green side, the green-black side, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Target player gains 2 and draws a card. And then desist for 4/2 hybrid Selesnya, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. The way these cards work is you either cast one or the other. There are cards that do either or. This is not one of them. And if I'm mistaken, leave a comment down below. Tell me all about how wrong I am. This is the card that's going to cause a lot of anger and strife. Leyline of the Guild Pack. 4 different various hybrid manas. Selesnya, Simic, Golgari, Gruul. 5 color. If it's in your opening hand, you may begin it with play on the battlefield, like every other Leyline they've printed. Each non-land permanent you control is all colors. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. Last week I went Cacophony Scamp combo. Leyline in the opening with a Cacophony Scamp, a Mountain, and 2 Gaia's Mites. Gaia's Mites, if it's the right card I'm thinking of, target creature gets +1/+1 for each basic land you control. So you play the Scamp with the Leyline on the field. Now your land taps for all 5 mana. It taps for 1 mana of any color. But you have all 5. So you bring out another land, and then you attack with the Scamp, double Gaia's Mites. So now it's an 11/11. Deals 11 points of combat damage. And then you get to activate the second or third line of Scamp's abilities of sacrificing it to proliferate. When this dies, it deals damage equal to its power. Power at that time when it died was 11. So you've done 22 points of damage on turn 2. Now, it's magical Christmas land, I know that. But as is one of many broken things that you're going to be able to do with Leyline of the Guild Pack. Yeah. This card's going to be a problem. And not a good one. I don't think it... Yeah, this is going to be broken. Because domain stuff still exists. And it still exists till the fall of this year. So there's that. The Scooby-Doo card, Meddling Youths. 3 red and a white for a 4/5 human detective creature with haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. Make a clue. The flavor text sells it. Well, if it isn't mean old Mr. Larchbottom, who's always been so eager to have the only dumpling stall in Oxblood Alley. This is literally Scooby-Doo the card. And then that's what the play boosters look like. And now we're going into green. The play booster box looks like. Just a couple cards in green. A Killer Among Us for 4 and a green for an enchantment. When a Killer Among Us enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human creature token, a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token, and a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Then secretly choose human, merfolk, or goblin. Sacrifice a Killer Among Us. Reveal the chosen creature type. If target attacking creature token is the chosen type, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and it gains Death Touch till end of turn. I'll mess with this card all day, every day. Sack it at any time. That is combat tricks for days. That is no good blocks at all. No good decisions can be made at all. Because if you let it through, I can sack it and make it a 4/4. If you block it, I can sack it, make it a 4/4, and if you block with a 10/10, as long as it doesn't have indestructible, it dies because of Death Touch. Stupid, dummy, good card. I like it. I like it a lot. This card. Slime Against Humanity. A sorcery spell for 2 and a green. Create a 0/0 green ooze creature token. Witch Trample. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2, plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes and or named Slime Against Humanity. A deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity. 40 Slime Against Humanities, 20 Forests. We're good to go. I don't think it's going to happen. Definitely not a budget card. Usually when they print cards like this, it's in the common slot, so you'll have access to it, but you're going to be paying $1.50 each on average for what these tend to do. Many decks want them. Commander decks want them. Standard players that definitely don't with the meta want them. So usually whenever they've printed a card, you may have any number of cards of this in your deck. They're common, and they usually go for about $1.50 to $2 each. Nowhere near budget. Another nowhere near budget card, Archdruid's Charm for 3 green mana for an instant. Choose one. Search your library for a creature or a land card and reveal it. Put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land. Otherwise, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Exile target artifact or enchantment. 3 green mana out for any one of these modal abilities are amazing. They're all viable. And if the first 2 aren't viable, you can get something that's viable, whether it be a land or a creature. Archdruid's Charm is a really good card. And I say it now. This will be an all-star of the format. What format that is? Standard. It's going to be an all-star standard. Watch. Lands. And there's only one. Because it's going to be my budget build. This is going to be my new pet budget build card to help fix mana. Public Thoroughfare enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, sack it unless you tap an untapped artifact or land you control. You can tap a clue and still sack it because it doesn't need to be tapped. Add 1 mana of any color. And my biggest problem with the 2 mana, 3 mana decks in the budget is the mana. Fixing is hard to come by. Cheap fixing. Your standard, even like the Plains Islands cards, like the basics that come into play tapped, that are 2 different land types, they're like 20 cents a piece. I can't dedicate $1.30 to 4 cards, 5 cards in the mana. This card is going to make dreams come true. It's going to fix so many of my decks as long as it stays within a 20-cent price range. I'm okay with 20 cents on Public Thoroughfares, a play set of them. That's 80 cents, and that's perfect fixing. Any color. You hear me? Any color. That's the biggest part of this card. Now, connect the dots. La, la, la. 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down. 1 and a red, discard your hand, sacrifice Connect the Dots, put all the cards exiled with Connect the Dots into their owner's hands. Remember folks, you need to discard that card face down. You're not allowed to look at it. You're not allowed to know what it is. Do not make that mistake. It even tells you in the reminder text, you can't look at it. Like, you can't look at it. Doo-da, doo-da. So yeah, if you accidentally look at the card, it's a match loss, I think. But yeah. Gonna be a good card. Gonna be put a lot of work in, and this is definitely a good red draw card, Bomat carrier type of card. Well, we're going to demand those answers for 1 and a red as an instant as additional cost to cast a spell, sack an artifact, or discard a card, draw 2 cards. It's your typical red drawing cards with a punishment involved, whether you have to sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. It's acted like it's a punishment, but it's really not. You're just getting rid of the garbage in your hand most of the time. I did the alternate art for this one because I do like the frame of the alternate arts in the set, which are like case files. For Fugitive Codebreaker, 1 and a red. For Creature Goblin Rogue, that's a 2/1. Prowess and Haste. Prowess, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. All right. Disguise 5 and a red. Cost is reduced by 1 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. When this is turned face up, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. So when it's disguised, it's a 2/2, but the disguise cost is reduced for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. So at most, you can flip this up for 1 red. And that's like living a dream. But I like it. It's a good card. It's a goblin card, and it's definitely going to go into Zada because that card draw is pretty good. And Zada, I need to get ways to draw cards in unique ways. And sacking a goblin, not sacking a goblin, but, turning up this goblin and getting 3 cards for free. Yeah, sign me up. Then finally, expose the culprit in red. For 1 and a red, for an instant, choose 1 or both. Turn target face down creature up. Good combat tricks. Exile any number of face up creatures you control with disguise in a face down pile. Shuffle that pile, then cloak them. New mechanic. To cloak a card, put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2 creature with word 2. It's disguised, but you're being forced to do it. Turn it face up anytime for its mana cost if it's a creature card. If this hits spells, if this hits lands, you can't turn them face up. Interesting card. Shenanigans abound. With Expose the Culprit. And we're finally going into the white. This is where we're going to end up. And the rest of our set reviews, because I'm not doing the whole set. I've spread this apart, I think, across 3 episodes so far. Everybody else is doing it. But I really do like this set. Don't expect these a lot from me. But I really do like these sets. I really do like this set. Murders at Karlov Manor is going to be fun to play. Market Watch Phantom. For 1 and a white. 2/2 Spirit Detective. When another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, Market Watch Phantom gains flying until end of turn. This card. Anytime in a limited environment, which is draft or pre-release or sealed, cards like this that gain flying whenever something happens get out of control real fast because evasion is key in a lot of those formats. And then we'll go into the sealed part. There's a lot of small creatures with 1 power that'll make this thing cook. Especially with the expanded card pool of 3 years. Yeah, like, I'm already going over ideas in my head to how to make Market Watch Phantom absolutely stupid. It involves Ash. From Wild's Veldraine. Absolving Lamassu, 4 and a white for a creature Lamassu for a 4/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, all suspected creatures are no longer suspected. When it dies, you gain 3 life and suspect up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. A suspected creature can't block, but it also has menace. If your opponent has a lot of suspected creatures with all of them having menace, this gets rid of them, of having menace. I know there's another spell that does that instantaneously, or another creature, but it has flash. And you can do it anytime. That one is good, but Absolving Lamassu in a pinch can do some good things. And then finally, Thraben Inspector, the sequel, Novice Inspector, for 1 white, for 1/2. When it enters battlefield, investigate. This card is going to set my world afire when it comes to budget brews. As long as it's budget. If this card stays within the 25-cent range, I will be so happy. Because all the budget brew ideas I have in my brain have this card as a key component to activate early artifact stuff or token stuff early on. But cards like this tend not to stay that way for very long. Which is why when I start budget brews, I usually wait for a week after the sets come out officially to at least get some normalcy. I don't want to tell you like Novice Inspector was 5 cents when the set came out, and then by the time the video drops, it's $1.50. I don't want to do that to y'all. So that was the rest of the cards I'm going to go through for Karlov Manor, Murders at Karlov Manor, which will forever be mistaken as Markov Manor. Don't know why it was Karlov. Should have been Markov. Would have made more sense. I don't know. I've talked a lot. By the time you see this, as I said before, I'll be on vacation in Jersey. XtremeTVOnline.com, $4.99 a month. First 5 days are free. Check out all the action that we have on the network already, and also the plethora of content that we're releasing, just wrestling stuff in the future. This year is going to be amazing for XWW. I'm glad that you're watching here on YouTube and hopefully on the podcast. Other ways to watch this as well. My name is Dom Douglas, back-to-back commentator of the year for XWW. And may your top deck always be mythic. Man, Novice Inspector better be 25 cents a week after set or launches.